I'm so glad you're here. I'm Kate Champion. I'm an author, therapist, and generally curious human whose life has been full of ups and downs, twists and turns, mess and adventures, some intentional and some not so much. Welcome to Living Big Mindfully, a later in life podcast. Here are 3 questions for you. Are you ready? Are you in midlife or beyond? Or maybe struggling with next steps or finding your feet? Possibly feeling like something's missing, not quite right with your life? Or maybe you have a sense that you're really not living your own truth. Okay, you're right, that was way more than 3 questions. But were there any yes answers? Yeah? Okay, fantastic. That means that you are in the right place and this is the show for you. So grab a seat, get comfy, and join us for inspiring, heartfelt conversations. Conversations with real people just like you and me. Listen in as we chat about life, love, health, healing, and thriving well into our later years. And let's commit to creating honest, fulfilling lives and giving a high five to living big mindfully. One more thing. Make sure you visit katechampionauthor.com. Check out Never Too Late and You Are Limitless, my best-selling books. And while you're there, be sure to download your free hiking guide. And remember, check out our Living Big Mindfully community on Facebook. And please share your favorite episode with your friends. Thank you so much. Okay, that is enough for me. Are you ready? Great. Then let's dive in. In this week's episode of Living Big Mindfully, I am excited to be connecting with debut author Maria C. Palmer. Maria has recently been featured in Food and Beverage Magazine, and her newly released book, On the Rocks, is receiving many awards and acclaims. Maria is an author, grant writer, and advocate for social justice who has had her fair share of joys and challenges over her lifetime. In this inspiring conversation, Maria shares openly about her personal experience growing up as the oldest daughter of an award-winning restaurateur and the mental and physical spiral she battled after her father was incarcerated. In this conversation, we cover it all. Depression, anxiety, recovery, wellness, resiliency. Maria candidly shares her thoughts about failure and getting through the dark times. And she tells us about her chance encounter with a nun who opened the door to advocacy and really encouraged Maria to share her story. We chat about how the use of yoga, nature, and exercise has played a huge role in both of our healing journeys. And as expected, Maria ends the show with some powerful sage advice. This is a heartfelt, compassionate conversation full of hope and healing. I truly hope you enjoy the show. All right. So hello, Maria. It's so good to connect with you today. How are you?
Hello, Kate. Thank you so much for having me. It is just wonderful after we've been in touch here over the internet now for years. It's fantastic to be able to see you and hear you. And this is just awesome. Thanks for having me today.
You're welcome. And Maria has just launched a book. It's called On the Rocks. And she's worked so hard and the book is doing so well. And I just so happy for her. So tell us a little bit about you and who you are, a little bit about the book, and we'll dive in.
Sure. So my name is Maria Costanzo Palmer, and by trade, I am a nonprofit grant writer, but I'm also now a debut author. Thank you, Kate, for mentioning that. And my book is called On the Rocks, and it is written in narrative style. It's a nonfiction story, but it reads like fiction. And basically the subject is my father, who was a incredibly well-known restaurateur, Italian restaurateur back in the 1980s through the early 2000s. And the story tells his dream of opening a world-class restaurant in a corrupt, small little neighborhood right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, called McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, which, if anybody here is listening and you're a football fan, in the early winter, late fall, Damar Hamlin from the Buffalo Bills suffered a cardiac arrest on the field. And he is, in fact, from McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. So his mother's daycare, which I think now he's raised close to $9 or $10 million for, it shares an alleyway with my father's former restaurant space. So that's how you may have heard about McKees Rocks if you're thinking, oh, I heard of this town and that's why. But anyways, this project, as you had mentioned, Kate, is very long overdue. It took me 17 years to write this book.
Wow.
It took so long because at first, and as we kind of have chatted about your project too, I didn't really realize that it was meant to be a book. I thought I was writing a family history project, and my dad has lived a really interesting life. And at one of his lowest points, I realized that what he was missing the most was his restaurant days. So we started talking about that, and we started having conversations about that. And I would ask him things like, what's the best thing that ever happened to you at the restaurant? Or tell me a crazy story about one of the customers, or tell me who your favorite celebrity was that came in and why. And I would just press record. I had one of those old school tape decks, that I used to use for my classes at Syracuse University whenever I was recording professors. And I would just ask him a question, press record afterwards, just kind of basically do a transcript of whatever it was that we had talked about. And that's how things started. And then how they evolved, I got stuck and I didn't really know what to do. And I kind of took it as far as I could take it. And luckily, I was still in touch with my AP English teacher, Ruthie Robbins, also formerly known to people in the Pittsburgh area as Ruthie Dines. And she had just recently gotten divorced. She moved to Buffalo, New York, and she was editing books for published authors in Buffalo. And so whenever she learned that I was writing this story, she asked if she could read some of it. And I said, sure. And she ended up taking it to the writers group to get their opinion on it. And, they all agreed on two things. Number one, it needed a lot of work. And number two, it had a lot of commercial potential. So it was from then on that Ruthie and I partnered together, and we made a decision. The book was partially in my voice and partially in my father's voice. Mm-hmm. And we made the decision to make it one voice, and that was my father's voice. And so the book is written in first person perspective, narrative in my father's voice, but we are two female writers, and that confuses the heck out of a lot of people, including my agent.
I'm laughing because when I first met you, or thought I met you, I thought you were male. I thought you were Joe. Joe is the handle. And I thought you were male for a long time. And I can't remember, maybe you connected with one of my books or something. We had a little back and forth. And I think I was typing my message to Joe, like Joe, blah, 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 blah. And you said, actually, I'm not Joe. I'm actually Maria, and I'm a female, and blah, blah, blah. So I was confused for a long time, but it's beautiful. Joe has such an amazing following and such a character. Just his character comes through and just big and larger than life. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, absolutely. I had read, you're going to have to remind me of the title, but it was the book that you had written just so beautifully about all different vignettes of people that were struggling with something, and they connected to nature and exercise as their outlet. And you're going to have to say the name so that everybody could hear it.
So that book is You Are Limitless.
Yes, You Are Limitless. Absolutely. And I really connected with it because exactly what you're about is the exact thing that got me through a lot of my struggles. And you're right. My dad is a compelling character. He's a big personality. There's a reason why he has the handle on Facebook and Instagram, and I don't, because people draw to him. But being a compelling character, there's two sides to every person. And he's done just so much good in the world. And, we talk a lot about that in the book, but there's also been some really hard and challenging times that our family's gone through that, not every family has. And so through those really challenging personal times, I connected so much with your You Are Limitless book, because I saw myself in that, and I was able to start to heal and start to get better after, we went through, my father was in prison, and our family went through a 3-year investigation with the federal government. And eventually, because his name was mentioned in a federal grand jury investigation as somebody that might be doing something shady. And when that happens, unfortunately, it's a criminal case. And so he did serve jail time. And to us, all of us, that was a complete shock. And especially to me, I took it really hard with some mental health challenges. And so being with nature, connecting through yoga and reading and hiking and walking and even running. I don't run as much as I used to, but I have my Run Maria Run shirt on. I've run a couple of marathons, but being able to achieve those things that are in our control whenever our life is really out of control. That's certainly very much what I'm about. And that's why I'm just so happy to be here. And as I said earlier off air, I'm so glad that you launched this type of podcast, because whenever you give people hope and you give people a chance to connect with other people's stories and to see that they can bring that out in themselves, especially for those listeners out there that might be going through a trying time. These things only last for a little while. And the only thing constant about life is change. But we have to realize what we can grasp within our control when things are so out of control. And absolutely, the connections to nature, the connections to exercise, to breathing, to yoga, whatever is going to do it for you, those things do it for me. I know those things do it for you, Kate. And I'm just so glad that you've launched this podcast. And I want to extend my amazing congratulations to you on this effort, because it's big. It's really big.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd love, if you're comfortable, I'd love to take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of those darker times, because I think it is life. I have this phrase I love to use. I'm a psychotherapist too, and with clients, I really do want people to know that life is messy, right? It's full of downs and twists and turns and joys and challenges, and I think people sometimes think there's just this like magic golden pathway we just all walk through, and nothing kind of bad happens, right? There's no bumps in the road. But that life isn't like that. And you know that, and I know that. And I would love to hear a little bit more about, some of the darker days, whatever you're comfortable with sharing. Yeah.
Sure. I think that this is really important, because you're right. Life is very messy, and life is also very unpredictable. And at the time where my life kind of took a downward spiral, it was very unexpected. And, it was just a normal day. It was right before Memorial Day weekend, which tends to be a very happy time for people, right? You're getting ready for the summer and barbecues and parties, and really things couldn't have been going better with our family at that moment. My father had just built this world-class restaurant empire, and we were not in New York City. We were not in Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, or Miami. And so that in itself, or DC, that in itself was an anomaly. And things were going fantastically. We had won a bunch of national and international awards. We had just recently won the Dorona Award, which I always mess it up. So I apologize. My dad, I know as he's going to be listening to this podcast, he's going to say, Maria's going to mess it up. And I am. So it's the Distinguished International Restaurants of North America. I think I got it right. But that was before the James Beard Award, before James Beard had originally just covered chefs. Now it covers a whole lot more, and you can get a James Beard Award as a restaurant or as a restaurateur or even as an author. But at that time you could not. And so things were going very, very well. Like I said, we had celebrities that were coming in and out of the restaurant. And one day I was in between internships. I was a junior in college. I was just 20 years old. And I was in between my internships. I was always busy during the summer. And I was working at an advertising agency in Pittsburgh called Mark Advertising. And then I was working in the evenings at my father's restaurant, the Prima Donna. I also, I think, had an internship at a radio station a couple of days a week. And then I think I was lifeguarding. It was like crazy, just trying to keep busy. And I had this knock at the door. And I remember looking outside, and there was two men dressed in suits. And immediately, whenever you get that image in your mind, nothing good comes from two people dressed in suits with badges coming to your door. And so I opened the door. They verified that this was Joe Costanzo's residence. And I said yes. And then immediately I thought to myself, I think someone died. And, they invited themselves in. They asked where my father was. I, said, did anybody die? Like, what's going on? And they said, no, everything. And nobody died, but we need to know the whereabouts of where your dad is. And so, of course, he was at the restaurant. So I told them, and they were kind of on their way, and they immediately went to the restaurant. I immediately called my dad and said, two men in suits and badges from the federal government just came looking for you. And he didn't think anything of it. I personally didn't think anything of it either. I did not think, because we knew a lot of people. In the course of whenever the Prima Donna was in business, about 1 million people came through the doors in a 20-year span. So it wouldn't have been uncommon for somebody to ask my father a question about somebody that he would know. So that wouldn't have been an uncommon thing. So it was not a shock, but it was an uncomfortable feeling. And then what spiraled from there is we learned that a federal grand jury had mentioned his name in an investigation as somebody that was potentially doing something illegal. No proof. They just mentioned his name. And at the time, whenever you mention somebody's name in a federal grand jury, that case becomes criminal automatically, not civil. And so there was a 3-year investigation, and he ended up pleading guilty because the government has a 99 point something percentage rate of finding people guilty. So he decided to plead guilty to get a lesser charge, and they found him on a tax evasion charge. And again, if this happened today, he would not have gone to prison because the Clinton administration had signed a mandate saying at the time, which is now unconstitutional, but it was set up as a grid and said, if you did this amount of tax evasion for this amount of time, this is the number of time that you have to serve in prison. And so he did plead guilty to tax evasion charges. He spent 5 months in a federal facility and 5 months on house arrest. And at that time, for somebody that was 20 years old, just trying to figure myself out, it sent me into a complete downward spiral. And I've always been a type of person that has a lot of anxiety. That's just in my nature. Sometimes you can't, I always tell people, you can't rewrite, what has been given to you from above. So you got to learn to work with it. And for me, anxiety and depression have always been something that I've struggled with. And when this happened, it really threw me for a tailspin. And so I went into kind of this newer territory of just complete panic attacks. All day, all night, nothing helped. I lost a lot of weight. I was really sickly, thin looking. And I decided to move 3,000 miles away to Los Angeles because my boyfriend at the time, husband now, was going to be moving out there after college. And I thought, all right, if I move there, it's 3,000 miles away. Nobody will know about what happened with my family. I can start over new and it'll be fine. And so I tried to do that. But whenever you do that, your problems, and Kate, I know that you know this as a psychotherapist, they don't just stay where you leave them. They hop in your carry-on and they come with you. And so all of these problems came with me. And I consider myself a fairly functional person and member of society. I was not able to function. Whenever I got to Los Angeles, things were just really, really tough for me. And I just was having a hard time getting through the day. I couldn't even go to a restaurant because that, to me, having all those choices, whenever the waitress would come over and say, hey, we have XYZ specials and this and this and this and this. To me, it was so overwhelming. I would start to cry and then I would run out of the restaurant. And for somebody that grew up in a restaurant, that's bizarre. A restaurant is my place of feeling the most at home. And I became the least at home. And, little things like that. My poor husband, who was just overly fantastic. For a while, I couldn't even be around him because I felt like he was the impetus of my panic attacks. So, I told him, listen, I love you, but I can't be around you. So whenever I am okay with being around you, I'll call you, we'll get together, but you're going to have to give me space. And I'm not breaking up with you. I just can't do this right now. And weirdly enough, he's stuck around for all of this. God bless his heart. And he's a wonderful person and just really the reason why I'm probably still here and able to function today. But it was a very, very dark time for me that time, for sure.
Sounds like it. It sounds like it. So if you're comfortable, just kind of taking a moment and just kind of going inside and taking a breath. What is coming up for you? Because I see emotion. I'm connecting with emotion. What is coming up for you as you just touch on that period of your life for a moment? Can you share what's coming up?
Yeah. Just looking back on those times and just realizing that was some hard stuff. And especially only being 20 years old and having all of these things pelted on you, just newly graduating from college, that's a big enough life change for anybody, not with any of this other stuff going on. And then to have this large public investigation and to go from my family was on top of the world and we were good people, we remain really good people, and to see what happened, going from the top of everything to essentially losing it all, it does bring up a much darker time for me, and just kind of remembering, wow, back then, I don't know how I made it through, other than just putting one foot in front of the other, because it was just such a challenging time. I was not really ready to deal with my emotions because I wasn't ready to process the reality that I didn't want to hear. I had always thought I remember, and I haven't shared this with any, I just forgot about it. So this first interview that I'm actually sharing this, but I remember whenever my dad went to his sentencing, I wrote this really heartfelt letter, talking about all of the reasons why he was a pillar of the community, and he really was. And actually, we got our comeuppance because this past Sunday, we had a big launch party for the book, and Representative Anita Kulik, who's the state representative for the 45th District of Pennsylvania, came and, recognized him, gave him a proclamation for just being somebody that completely transformed the McKees Rocks community. And so, going from that to what we had become was really hard to bear for me. And just realizing, how far, I think the other emotion that's coming up for me right now is how far we've come, from that moment. And getting back to the letter, I wrote this really heartfelt letter to the jury and to the judge, pleading to let this go as a civil case. And my dad was more than willing to pay his fair share. The amount of tax evasion that was had over, I think, a 10-year period of time was about $10,000 more or less per year, which is nothing whenever you're running a huge business enterprise. And what was, I think, really challenging is that I don't even think those letters were read. It was just when you are tried and it's a big case and there are mandatory minimum guidelines, it's more or less, this is what you did, this is the amount of time you serve. And there was the humanity of everybody was sort of taken out of the process. And even how it was covered, that was really hurtful too, because like I said, our family was a pillar of the community. We had done so much. We'd given to many charities. The area of McKees Rocks is definitely a very depressed one. My dad kept a lot of people's families thriving through employment, through donating, he would do things with the local high school students, have a sports night and invite, families down and recognize people. He ran bingos. He funded the local Meals on Wheels. So there was so much good and so much life that came out of his restaurant. And he was always one, and still today, to share the wealth. That's always his little phrase. I share the wealth, and he did. And to be on the flip side of that, and to be even just kind of taking that in right now, it's heavy. It's heavy. And I'm happy that we're through it, but it was really rough time.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the media was, it sounds like it was kind of brutal at the same time. So maybe adding more pain to a very challenging situation. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How, what is that even like to kind of go from, it feels like this lightness, right? This lightness and this love and this giving to really kind of the dark side, right? And everybody's now focusing on this situations. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the headlines I remember was Costanzo being force-fed jail time. And, again, whenever you do so much good for a community and for an economy, and then something so tragic happens overnight, people that were once on your side just completely flip to the other. And I think that what people don't realize is that there's a lot of consequences to that, and not always the consequences that you intend. So, you may be reprimanding the person for whatever it is that they've done. And again, I'm not saying that it was correct to commit any sort of crime or tax evasion. I am saying that my dad did that with integrity. He admitted his guilt. He served his time. he did exactly what he needed to do to get through that. But, my point in all of this is that one of the reasons why I got involved when I got in California, and part of my healing was getting involved with an organization called Get on the Bus. And one of the consequences to what was happening with him was that it affected not only him, it affected me. I was 20 years old, a junior in college whenever his investigation started. My sister was in college. My sister's 4 years younger than me. So she was finishing out her high school years, and then he went to prison whenever she was in college. And, talk about being embarrassed. I mean, it was a huge embarrassment to our entire family. So the consequences of what had happened and how things were handled, it just didn't fall on the person that committed the crime. It falls on the family members. My mother was incredibly depressed, as she should have been, and just very sad with everything that happened. I had my father's mother at the time was alive, and she obviously took things very hard. My father has siblings, and all of this trickles down to everybody else. And so one of the reasons why I got involved in Get on the Bus, and hopefully maybe we could talk about that a little bit, because that's a crazy story too, was Get on the Bus helps children of the incarcerated. So it brings kids who essentially are minors, mostly 18 and younger, but we have brought some kids that are older than 18 too, to go see their incarcerated parents. And the studies have shown that whenever kids have a relationship with their parents, it's not only beneficial for the children, but it's beneficial for recidivism rates, for behavior rates at the prison. It just brings a lot of good and a lot of, fresh air into a situation that's not so good. So that also was a big portion of my healing too.
As you connect with that and being able to turn, right, again, the really painful, traumatic situation, and now moving through it and out of the other side comes this wonderful kind of organization. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm super curious.
Yeah, so this is another really wild story, and this is why my husband should probably get Man of the Year at some point. So and I'm not lying. So he had seen me. I was really depressed, like I said. I mean, very it could not function. I had a hard time. I'm a writer, and I really couldn't string a sentence together, maybe just 2 words. I'm going, or I'm hungry, or I'm sleeping. That's it. That's really all I could say at that time. My words just escaped me, but we were searching for a church. We had both newly moved to Los Angeles, and he grew up as an Episcopalian and wanted sort of a church home for us. And I grew up Catholic and kind of was over being Catholic. And he had seen this church in Beverly Hills, California, that a nun, a Catholic nun, was coming to speak about an organization that she had started called Get on the Bus, that at the time had brought children to go see their incarcerated mothers. So he picked up the flyer. He said, "I think you should go to this." He said, "I don't think so. I'm from small town, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Beverly Hills, it ain't for me. That's just not who I am. I don't want to go there. People are I always thought people would know more about me than they actually did. And I always thought too, whenever at this lowest point in my life, which is really funny to look back on it, because definitely we take things in and we assume that people are thinking things that they're not about us, right? So I had always thought whenever I was going out on the street, immediately people were saying, "There's something wrong with that girl," or "What's going on with her?" or "Why is she acting so weird?" I immediately always thought, no matter where I was, that's what people were thinking about me. And I internalized that. I think that's why I didn't talk a lot, because I thought as soon as I open my mouth and I say who I am, even though nobody knows who I am, but I thought as soon as I say who I am and anything about myself and I talk, people are going to say there's something wrong with that person. And that's what I thought at the time. And so I really didn't want to put myself through that. But, I respected and loved my boyfriend, now husband. And so I agreed that I would go under the contingency that if I would sit in the back, not say anything, and if I felt like I needed to leave, I would leave. And he agreed. He actually dropped me off too, because driving, weirdly enough, like especially before the time of cell phones and GPS, I am like very directionally challenged. It's one of my tragic flaws. And so oftentimes I end up in other states, not meaning to at all. Like I just have no directional capacity of where I'm supposed to be going. So he had agreed he would drop me off at the door and then pick me up afterwards. And if I wanted to leave, I could leave and no big deal. And so I went. I was very quiet. I sat in the back. I did not talk to anybody. I came like 5 minutes before it got started, so it wasn't awkward. I pretended I brought something to read, so I pretended like I was very occupied, so nobody would say hello to me, which I know that's like very messed up. But I just made it look like
it's avoidance, right? I mean, people with anxiety, people with panic, people with depression, that is a beautiful avoidance strategy, right? I mean, that's what we do. Yeah. So it's your body protecting yourself.
Nice little escapism. And then I'm sitting there, I'm waiting for this nun, no nun, I'm looking at my watch, no nun. So all of a sudden, this presentation gets started. A lady from the church gets up and, says, "We're so excited to have Sister Suzanne Jabro here." So they, give her this long introduction, and I'm looking around. I'm trying to find the habit in the audience. There's no habit. There's no nun in this place. So all of a sudden they stop. She stands up. She's like basically in the audience, stands up. She's got her nails and toes perfectly manicured. There's no habit to be found. She's got jewelry all over. She's wearing a pair of high wedge sandals. And, she scurries up to the microphone and she's saying hello and giving hugs and high fives to people. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, this is my dad in a female form. It just is. Like, she's so gregarious, just like whenever you get to know her, she's even crazier in a great way. Like, she's revolutionizing the world still. She just started another nonprofit at like age 75. She's nuts in a good way. Good nuts. So she grabs the mic and basically tells the story of how she started Get on the Bus. And she had meant to bring volunteers to the women's prisons. And so she was really excited about it. She sits all the women in prison down and says, "You're going to get visitors," because women never get visitors. So they said, "Oh, yay." She said, "I'm going to bring up people from this Catholic delegation in Los Angeles. We're going to all ride a bus and we're going to come and visit you." And so they were excited to have visitors. And then there was one woman sitting in the circle, and she said, "I, appreciate that you're bringing us visitors, but if you're bringing a bus, why would we want to meet these people that we've never met whenever we haven't seen our own families?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" And so she went around the circle and says, "First of all, do you visit regular with your children?" 100% of that group said no. And then the second question was, "How long has it been since you saw your kids?" The person that had seen their kids the most recent was 4 years. And the person that was the least recent was, I think, 17 years. So she immediately knew that she had to bring this bus to Chowchilla women's prisons in California from Los Angeles. And so, being just the trailblazer that she is, and again, she's kind of like my dad, total dreamer, just does whatever the heck she wants. She wasn't worried about insurance and all this other stuff. So she's like, "I don't care. I'll take all responsibility. I'm bringing these families on the bus. So the first bus, forget on the bus, had 17 children who came from central Los Angeles up to Chowchilla Women's Prison, which is about a 5-hour drive from Southern California to Northern California. And she had this reunion, and it was just gorgeous, and the media covered it, and she just knew that this was what she was meant to do always. So she started this organization like that, and I'm hearing it, and everybody's crying. And at that point, I couldn't even cry. I didn't have any tears left. I just had no emotions. I would just sit there. And all of a sudden, I felt my eye kind of well up, and I felt a tear. And I thought to myself, I'm actually feeling something. I haven't felt something in a really long time. And so I let it go, but I kept myself kind of composed. And afterwards, I pulled out my book again and pretended like I was really busy. And I let everybody go and visit with her because she seemed to know the entire world in Los Angeles, and she was giving hugs and high fives. So just about everybody had cleared out, and they were starting to clean up. And I thought, this is my moment. I can go up and I can introduce myself to this person, or I can leave right now, and it's up to me. But I felt that this woman's energy was something that I needed at the time to start to heal my own pain. And so I went up to her and I said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. Give myself a little pep talk. I said, just going to introduce myself. I'm going to tell her that I'm not from here, that I came to her presentation. I was really moved by what she had to say. And then I'm going to get her card. And then maybe a few days later, I can touch base with her privately and see, maybe if there's something there. Because I was also looking for a job too, very new to California. So I went, I said what I had to say, and she just asked all the right follow-up questions. She immediately made me feel comfortable, and I forgot that there were other people in the room. Everybody else faded away. It was just her and I. We were having this discussion, and, she said, where are you from? You said you're not from here. And I said, oh, I'm from Pittsburgh. How did you get here? Do you have any family here? We started talking, and then immediately I said to her, I told you that your story resonated with me, but I want to tell you why. And so she was the first person that was a stranger that I had opened up to and said, my father is in prison right now. And I said, I don't know what I've said. I'm so moved by your story because I was not a child whenever this happened. My family has the means to go and visit him. He didn't do something horrific, but I'm really moved by what it is that you had to say. And if there's any way that I can help you, I don't even know. Maybe I can just give you a donation or do something. I would love to connect. And I gave her my information, and I took her information. And then I thought, oh, wow, this is great. And then she never called me. for months. I never heard from her. And I thought, oh, this is just one of those missed opportunities. Maybe she was not as into me as I was to her. Well, I decided to try again months later because I was doing a master's degree program at Pepperdine University, and I needed to do some sort of thesis. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go one more time. If she doesn't want anything to do with me, then fine. But I felt like there was something there, and then there was nothing there. So I call one day and she answers. So I start explaining to her, hey, this is going to sound very weird and kind of stalkerish. I know that you speak all over the world. I know you're not going to remember me, but I'm just going to tell you who I am and how you might know me. And she goes, is this Maria? The Maria from Beverly Hills and All Saints? And I said, yeah, that would be me. And she goes, I've been trying to find you for months. She said, I dropped your information. I couldn't find it. So I called All Saints the next day and I said, there was this girl. She goes to your parish. She's got dark hair. She's in her 20s. She's about this height and this weight. And she said, you basically fit in with most of the population in California. So nobody knew who the heck you were. Nobody. And I couldn't find you. And I put like something out to the church. Hey, do you know this person? Like, she's like, I cannot believe you are calling me. So she said, what are you doing today for lunch? So I wasn't doing anything. I was unemployed. I said, I'm not doing anything. Will you come to my office? Yeah, I'll come to your office. So I come to her office. We start talking. She shows me around. It was just a really wonderful time. And she goes, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, I'm not sure. It was the weekend. And she said, okay, well, I would like you to meet me here. I'm going to speak at this church in Pasadena. And you said that you wanted to help me. And, I think that if they hear from you, I think that would be, number one, really healing to you. And number two, very helpful to me. So, I'd like to pick you up and I'd like to take you to the church. So I said to her, I don't know. I'm never spoken about what happened to me. And I don't know that I really feel comfortable in doing that. And she said, okay, well, I'll give you my number. I'm going to pick you up at this time. I want you to go home and I want you to talk to your husband, and see what he thinks. And then, get back to me. So I go home. I tell, my husband, my boyfriend at the time, all about this. And he says, you got to do it. I said, I don't know. And he said, well, don't do it for you. Don't do it for you. Do it because there's kids that need to see their parents. And that's why you do it. Sorry. I just need like 1 minute.
All the time you need. This is really important. Just take all the time you need. There's no rush.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
So I called her back and I said, all right, I'll do it. You can pick me up. I'll do it. And so we went and I just got up and I told people who I was and I told people about my story. And I told people, listen, do not, whether or not you resonated with my story, it's not important, but, I'm here to help preserve relationships of other children who are not as fortunate as I am. I cannot begin to imagine what they're going through as minors dealing with this, and also being from backgrounds and means that do not allow them to freely go and see their parents and see, touch, and talk to their parents. And I remember we passed around a collection, and after church, we sat there and we had, $5 and $1 and $20. And, we added it up. And I think it was like $2,000 or $3,000, just from speaking. And she said to me, well, I think we need to start taking this show on the road. And we did. I went with her and went all over California. Just as a volunteer. And I would just, tell my story. She would collect the money. I'd go my separate way. She would go her separate way. It started to make me feel so good about myself, because something really negative that had happened to me was positively impacting someone else. I did need the money at the time. I certainly did. I was very poor and, just out of college, but it felt very good for me to be able to earn all that money for her and for her organization and to do all of that good in the world. And that's whenever I slowly started to kind of get my sea legs back. And one day we were going speaking somewhere, I think in Central California on the coast, and the director had just quit. And the director was a former child of a woman who was incarcerated who participated in the program. And when they hired the director, I thought, man, there's just nobody more perfect for this job than this person. And we're sitting at the gas station, and I think Suzanne was out pumping her own gas, because that's something that you do in California, not so much here in New Jersey, but definitely in California. And she gets in the car and she tells me that the director quit that morning. And I said, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? You have this big event coming up and a big training and everything. And she goes, oh, there's no issue. I have somebody else in mind. And I said, well, who? And she said, Maria, it's you. And I said, I cannot do this. I am just out of college. I've not even had a real job. I mean, I think at the time I got fired from David's Bridal because I was too honest with people and telling them, like, I don't think this is the dress for you. Just saying, I'm just trying to tell you, you want this to be a really special day. I don't think like your boobs are kind of hanging out here. It's probably a little tight on the bod. I wouldn't go with this one. So essentially my honesty did not get me very far there, but she said, I think you can do this. And I believe in you and it will be easy. Famous last words. It'll be easy. Nothing in life is ever easy, right, Kate? Like it's always freaking hard. But for some reason, again, I consulted with my boyfriend, now husband, and I said, Joe, what do you think? She wants me to do this job. I don't think I can do it. It's kind of like a very, statewide job. It's a big job for somebody just out of college because it's a lot of travel. I'd be interacting with the CDCR, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I would be very public in the media, being interviewed about these really hard topics because not everybody is on board with bringing kids to go see their parents in prison. I'd be going into prisons and presenting to the incarcerated population about the program. I'd be working with really big donors, volunteers, the board members, celebrities, because LA has got a lot of those. And, I said, I don't think I could do this. And he just said, you can do it. You should do it. Do not pass up this opportunity. This is going to be good for you. And what happened to follow was I accepted the position. And that in itself was the healing gem for me because I had thought when I accepted it, and again, I'm trying not to get emotional here, but I had thought whenever I had accepted this position that I was going to do Maria C. Palmer. Well, I think I was Maria Costanzo at the time, but I was going to do all of this good for children and families of the incarcerated. It was going to be all about me and I was going to do all of this good. And in turn, it was going to make me feel good. And then, it passes on. That is not at all what happened, at all. Yes, I was a conduit. I helped things happen. I organized things. I connected families, with their loved ones. I got everybody on the bus. I got things approved. Yes, I did all of those things. That was checked off the list. But what I didn't realize is I was not the one that was helping anything. It was the families that were teaching me, and they were helping me to learn things about unconditional love and forgiveness and being part of a family unit, even whenever the stakes were down and times were tough, and believing in yourself, even whenever everybody around you is saying otherwise. And those were the types of things that I was encountered with, and that's my second book project, by the way. The things that I learned on the bus, which I'm currently working on right now. But that's my healing. That's my story. And that's what it had become. And because of Get on the Bus, I was given an opportunity to send some really good chips out in the world and learn that I loved working and helping others. And that's what I do to this day. I work for a nonprofit here in Paterson, New Jersey called St. Paul's Community Development Corporation. And we, help people with a hand up and a hand out, not a handout, and giving them basic needs, food, shelter, job training, helping their children into the educational system, helping with things like immigration and just feeling a part of the greater community. And so that's whenever I knew that this was really the calling of my life. And, I'm just so, I sit here with you, Kate, and looking back on all of this, I know you haven't asked me this, but I'm going to answer it anyways. And, just feeling so lucky and just so blessed that through all of these really challenging times, all of this has come to be, and all of this good has come out of my life. And, to know that we can always, when there's a dead end and when there's something that's really hard for us, we can always choose to go left, or we could choose to go right. And I know that there's a dating app that does that same thing, but I'm too old to know how it goes. But swiping left and swiping right. I hear some of my single friends talking about it, but we always have a choice where we want to go. We don't necessarily have a choice of what happens to us. I would have never chosen this path. Nobody wants their family member to go through all of this crap and lose everything in your life. But sit here now with this omniscient presence of thinking, there's a reason why this happened to me. And that's the reason. And, I feel completely lucky and blessed to know that this is how the path of my life was supposed to go. And we know who mentioned my family in the federal grand jury investigation. And instead of being bitter and, hateful to that person, I'm actually thankful in a weird way, because the amount of opportunities that this has given me to grow and to be the person that I want to be. I probably would have never worked for Get on the Bus if this had not happened. I probably would have never been able to impact people here in Paterson, New Jersey. I would definitely not be on a podcast with you right now if this had all not happened the way that it did. I'd really just be living the high life and, having this really great restaurant family, which in itself was a wonderful thing. But sometimes we have to be grateful for the things that we didn't ask for, even if they're bad, because they can turn into something good.
Yeah. I am feeling so much right now. I mean, just kind of awe-inspired, the hope, the healing, the way this really dark time has really informed your life. And you've gone on to use that to impact so many others, right? That is just the most beautiful. That is the most beautiful thing, just the most beautiful thing. So thank you so much. I totally hear you, right? I totally hear that, these dark times, and I think we all have dark times, some bigger and darker than others, but there is another side. There is a through, right? I know you mentioned you kind of feel like you come up against this dead end. And I know in those moments the darkness does feel like a dead end, but it isn't. There is, unless there's death, right? Death is super final, but there is a through, and there is another side, and that's been my experience, and I'm connecting that with your experience, and I just really want listeners to hear that.
Well, thank you, Kate. That's exactly, why I wanted to come on your show today. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So let's just, again, there's a lot of emotion right here. So let's just take a breath or two. I need to take a breath. So grateful for you for sharing today. So again, thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anything else if you want to share or cover or express for people that might be listening in today? Anything else you want to?
Sure. If we could just pop back to the book for just a second, because I just wanted to share a couple of really high points with that too, for people that, might think, why should I pick up this book? So the cool thing, and I know that we touched upon this at the top of the hour, but the book is written in narrative first person perspective from Joe's voice, but we are two female authors. And the cool thing is that we've gotten a lot of critical acclaim because of that. And I feel very blessed. LA Weekly last week just named me one of the 15 top authors on the rise to watch in 2023. And I sit here right now, so excited because On the Rocks is the #1 best-selling book in the culinary memoir category as we're recording this. #2 is Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, and #3 is Stanley Tucci's Taste. And weirdly enough, this project has gotten so much rejection. I can't even tell you. I mean, we queried this to 265 agents. 140 of them flat out said no. Some laughed at me. 108 ghosted me and never got back. 17 said, yes, I'll see a little bit more. And only one person offered us representation. And same thing with our submission process. We submitted in September of 2021, signed with our agent in July, and this book did not sell. It had a lot of close passes, but it did not sell or get any sort of offer until almost over a year later. We signed our contract. And any authors that are out there, that after a book's been on submission for a year, it's considered dead. So that in itself, talking about rising above a challenge, that in itself was very, very challenging. So, I would just encourage listeners, if you liked what you heard today and you liked my story, please do check out the book. It's really wherever books are sold. Right now, you can get it on Amazon. You can hit up my website, Maria C. Palmer, MariaCPalmer.com. And, support your local booksellers too. It keeps on selling out of Amazon. So support your local booksellers. And we do have a book bub for the month of August through the beginning of September. So it's on ebook right now for 99 cents. So get your hard or soft copy and then get your ebook so you don't injure yourself in bed. I don't know if that happens to you, right? Like
it does happen.
And then the book falls on your feet.
Yeah.
It's not good. Yeah. Don't go to the ER. Same thing if you're stuck in the pickup line. Kids are going back to school now and you need something to do. Get the ebook too. So then that way you could just pick up where you left off. And yep, that's all I have to say.
I'll make sure I put some links in the show notes so people can access that and get straight to that book, and highly recommend it. So as we wrap up today, I do like to ask guests, what from all of this, all of your experience, everything that's kind of informed your life, what is one piece of sage advice you might want to share with listeners today?
Sure. So I think the most poignant thing that resonates with me throughout my entire life is do not ever give up. I think everything in my life experience, and we didn't even talk about my father's health challenges, and he's had, a couple of kidney transplants, and I really had to advocate for him to be able to get those transplants. So he was definitely knocking on death's door quite a bit. And, even through my early days of trying to get into Syracuse University, which was a top school for broadcasting. And, I didn't really have the credentials of, where I was from or, what my test scores were to get into a place of that stature. But when you believe in yourself more than anybody else believes in you, it is not the smartest person in the room that is the most successful person. It is by far the most resilient person. So if you can pick yourself up, it is very normal to receive no's in life. I just shared how many no's I received on this project. My stats are not good. For anybody to say that Maria came out of nowhere and all of a sudden she's having so much success, you should have talked to me for 17 years whenever people laughed at me when they said my project would be nothing more than maybe just a regional thing where a couple of people that maybe were related to me would read my book. There's very little hopes for anything that I was ever going to do. And it's really rising above that and being able to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and not go blindly. Of course, listen, take constructive feedback and criticism, be humble, be grateful, but also believe in yourself and you just get through it. You're going through something hard. As you had said, Kate, there's a way through. Just keep on walking. And then eventually you'll start running. And, even if it's just as basic as whenever I was going through some really tough times, I actually had to remind myself to eat. And anybody knows me knows I love to eat. I'm Italian. That's like what I'm about. But I would actually schedule in the day and say, okay, I need to eat something at this particular point during the day, because my whole system was off and I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't feel emotions. I was couldn't cry. Wasn't laughing. I didn't laugh at anything for a really long time. So if you're going through that, just meet your basic needs. And then eventually, once you start meeting those basic needs, then, you branch out and you do something else, you try something else, and you don't be afraid to fail, because who cares? If you fail, you just pick yourself right back up and you try with somebody else. Somebody else will tell you yes eventually if you fail. It's nothing on you. It's all about, where they are. And they weren't the right person. They weren't the right partner for you for life. They weren't the right partner for you for business, for your project. Don't be sad. Be happy that, you're going to find somebody better in the end. And that's where I will end.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So thank you. I mean, again, so much of heartfelt gratitude for your honesty and your passion and your compassion, and just such a beautiful conversation. And I wish you every success and blessing, not only with the book, but with your, with your future journey. Just a wonderful, wonderful conversation today. Thank you. Thank you,
Kate. Thank you, Kate. Right back at you. Thank you so much for having me. This was a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your time. I love to hear from listeners, so connect with me at katechampionauthor.com. Remember to grab your free hiking guide, and please take a quick moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Thanks so much. Take care. Until next time.